Shalom and welcome to Nazarene Israel. My name is Norman Willis, and this is our presentation for Parasha Shelach. And we're calling this the mission of the sent ones, because as we're going to see in this parasha, if you're sent on a kingdom mission. It has something to do with preparing the way for Yahweh, his kingdom, and his people. So, with that in mind, I would like to come to this week's question. Wow. Let's come here to it, and we'll talk in just a minute. So this came to my attention. So my assistant, so Oscar working contact and Rivka working as my assistant. Between them, they can usually solve issues. And she tells me this. She says, would you like to handle this one, basically? Because this seems like something that Ephraim does a lot of. And I'm paraphrasing, but if I comment the way that I would like to comment, some might not understand why I'm being so direct and this kind of a thing. So I agree completely. I see the problem, and so Father Yahweh called me to repentance in 5759 or 1999. And ever since that time, I have been blessed to be able to research what was the original first century sect of the Nazarenes full time, with the intention of essentially restarting the sect according to scripture. There are several claimants to the title, but not according to scripture. So we show everything in studies. I don't know if people have considered the website, this kind of a thing. Here's the question. So that I said, so what's the, wow, this must be good. So here's the question. It says, and I don't know if this person is a man or a brother or a sister, or a brother or a sister. Yeah, I would like to be respectful. I'd like to keep these presentations professional, but it's very difficult. People will say, well, you're talking over our heads, Norman. So please, can you put things in terms that we can understand? So I will do my autistic best. But so the way I'm reading this, again, I don't know whether this is a brother or a sister. It does seem like someone interested in learning about what we have to teach, but to me, it's like it's either whining or I'm not sure what it is, but it's like just exasperated, just upset with us. It's like, can you please talk about something else than battling with them? I was like, oh, them. Okay, full stop. Whoa, 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 whoa. Them. Okay, and it kicked a whole train of thought, a whole bunch of stuff we were going to talk about in the Four Horses series. We're rearranging the whole thing. This particular letter, well, this particular letter is okay. Then battling with them. Okay, excuse me. Define them. Who is them? Judah. We're talking about Judah here. Judah and Levi, Benjamin, are brothers in the covenant. Okay, so why, please talk about something else than battling with them. About the Talmud, what they do, what they say, and concentrate on teaching the word, please. So now, I don't know how to say this. This to me, this particular piece of correspondence it's another face of the spirit of Esav, and we're going to talk about that throughout this presentation. And I want to be kind, I want to be gentle, I want to be loving. And this kind of a thing is very common. And we spent 1,260 years in Esav's house, and we learned some very bad habits. And we've had 500 years to clean up. We've had 507 years. We've had 10 Jubilee cycles and 1 Shemitah cycle to get cleaned up, and we're not cleaned up. And it's time that we as a house get cleaned up and come back to the original first century faith. And people tune into this channel because they're getting something. I mean, unless this is a prank, unless this is a prank comment on YouTube. I mean, I've known people like this just to comment. I used to know a couple of Messianic Jewish brothers, and this was their ministry. It was that they would go online and see how they could get, they could get the presenter riled up or something like that. And this was their contribution to the body. I mean, just some very immature people out there. So I don't know. It could be that, but we want to take this as potentially a real question. Okay, so why are you battling with them about the Talmud? Why are you battling with Judah about the Talmud? Why are you battling with them about what they do and what they say? Okay, please, can you just concentrate on teaching the word? Please. Okay, so many things to talk about here. In the first place, hello, who are you? We don't know who you are. We don't know your name. So we're not going to use your real name. So we're going to be more direct. Now, again, I want to make the assumption that it's very possible that this could be someone who was either taught the wrong way or just really hasn't ever sat down to think about, are their attitudes actually pleasing to Yahweh? There's so much wrong with this letter. There's just so much wrong with this letter. In the first place, this person, you can tell, we're going to talk all about this. We can't unpack the whole thing, but this person is confused. So Bavel is Hebrew for Babylon, and it means confusion. So you have two houses, and you have divided authority. So you have people clamoring, different ideas, voting, this kind of a thing. They're confused. Why? Because they're not seeking Elohim's face. If they were to seek Elohim's face, Elohim would tell them what to do, but they're not seeking Elohim's face. So they're confused. So, and then we have the question of attitude here. I was talking with my assistant Rivka about this. It's like, she's just saying, there are so many people like this that, they in the contact section, they deal with so many comments like this. And so it's kind of like, well, yeah, when you get the same kind of comment, the same type of comment over and over again, it's indicative that there's a spirit on the movement. These are the same spirits that were around since first century times and before. So we talked before about, we got an invitation to go into the Catholic university and preach. It wasn't what we thought that it was going to be, but we had to investigate. So we thank you, those of you who did pray. It was a good contact. We learned a lot of good things. It wasn't what we'd hoped, but it was a good experience, and it will come. I'm sure Yahweh will use it someday. But we had the questions in the YouTube comment section were like, why would anyone teach to Judah? Or excuse me, why would anyone teach to Esav? And it's like, when you get these questions, it's kind of like, what spirit is this? Like, where have we seen this before? What verse does this remind us of? So, just a little bit of liquid. We talked before about how, when people say, why would you bother trying to reach the Catholics? The Pope is causing the church to implode. Why would you try to step into that vacuum and provide people with real teaching and real light? It's just kind of like, what? It's just contrary to sound doctrine. We'll talk about that. So, but so what we thought of was the parable of the tax collector and the sinner. So you have a tax collector. He's not even raising his eyes to the heaven, but he's asking for mercy because he knows Elohim is all powerful. He knows that he has sin. He's a sinful man. But then you had I'm not sure what happened to the slides here. Yep. So there we had Luke 18 and verse 11. So first you had the Pharisee, the Orthodox Jew, same sect, same spirit. just changed the name in the Middle Ages. But the Pharisee is thinking that the works of his hands are saving him. Okay, that's the Pharisaic. So it's their actions, their physical actions, their choice to obey the commands, and then their physical actions, as opposed to giving themselves over to Elohim and his spirit and hearing his voice and doing what he says. So the Pharisees would emphasize a list of actions, whereas we would emphasize the movement of the spirit in a loving way. So the Pharisee is looking at himself as being superior because he follows a man-made code of law that's based allegedly on Elohim's law, but which actually replaces it. Okay, then come here to verse 13. In comparison, the tax collector, he knows that he's not all that. So Yeshua is telling us that the man who knows he's not all that is going to go down to who's asking for mercy is going to go down to his house justified, rather than the one who thinks he is all that because he's following a man-made code of law. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And we just thought about this, and it's the same spirit. It's like, why would you bother teaching? Why would you bother trying outreach to Judah? Why would anyone want to try to talk and dialogue with them? And I don't know how this person, you just get these random comments on YouTube comments, and if they're even real, but maybe they are. So you need to address it. And what you need to help the person understand is just what a bad spirit that question comes from. If that's not a prank, if that is a prank comment, that's also bad for different reasons. You dissipate, you're wasting time and resources we don't have to waste. It's not mature. It's not what Yeshua said to do. But if it's a real question, if you're new to Nazarene Israel, if you've been around Nazarene Israel for perhaps less than a year, if you're new to Hebrew roots, or you're new to the two house theory, but if you're new to Nazarene Israel for less than a year, which we want to give that possibility, first off, wow, why would anyone approach? It's like the arrogance of just like, what do we think this is? You know what I mean? Like, is this like a jukebox? Like, you're going to make your demands and we have to fulfill your demands? Like, you're not quoting authority of Elohim. You're just expressing your heart. So bless your heart. We need to bless your heart because your heart is expressing some things that come from you rather than expressing things that come from Elohim. Right there. So individual expressions, I want this, in a religious context, typically Esav is at the root of that. So we're looking at a red horse comment. So the other thing that came to mind is in Luke chapter 9, starting in verse 54. So Yaakov and Yohanan saw this group. So they said, Adon, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, just as Eliyahu did? And Yeshua turned and rebuked them and said, you don't know what manner of spirit you're of. And in love, I would say this to whoever wrote that comment, whether it's prank or real, whether you've been around Nazarene Israel for less than a year or more than a year, that's a very bad fruit, basically, to do that. So you're calling Judah them, and you're not talking about dialogue with Judah. So you're devaluing Judah. So can you see where, like, that's what Yeshua is talking about here? Okay, Yaakov and Yohanan were devaluing the other group, and Yeshua, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here for destruction. I'm not here for devaluation. I'm not here for depreciation. That's the Esavite interpretation. Okay, so if we just thought, there's so many people we've met that have this problem, and that's the biggest problem, I believe, Well, Ephraim's got two main problems. One is to differentiate from Esau, and the other one is to form the stick of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim. But it won't happen when people have this kind of spirit. That's what we're kind of reading through this question. So, the letter didn't quote any authority. It's just, I want this. It's like, wow, you're not happy with the strained peas, so you're going to spit that in her face, and you want to demand the applesauce or something, or what is? I mean, this is kind of like the reaction that we get. That's kind of the spirit you get. So, if we had proper authority, if we're talking about proper, genuine biblical authority, you have to cite it. You have to state what is the authority that you're operating under. Why should I listen to you? So, Matthew Yahoo 28, starting in verse 18. He says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Okay, so what he says goes. Okay, he's Mashiach Nagid. He came when Daniel 9:25 and 26 said he would. There's no other contender. No one else was born in Beit Lechem. That's him. He's here. He's one like Moses. He's here to show us how it's done. Okay, he's the Prince of Peace. I mean, that's the field marshal of peace. Okay, he's a commander, Mashiach Nagid, Mashiach the director, Mashiach the king. It's him. Okay, so what's he say? He's got the authority. What does he want? He says, go therefore and make disciples in all nations, immersing them in my name. If you want to know why we use the my name combination, we have a study, Immersion in Yeshua's Name Only, in Nazarene Scripture Studies, Volume 3. Well, what are they supposed to teach these disciples? Just, oh, well, I know who Yeshua is. I'm going to sit in a circle on Sabbath and break some bread and I'm done. No, he says, teaching them to obey all things that I have commanded you. We've talked many times. I don't know how long this person, we do get comments very similar to this. Like, why don't you do things my way? Okay, well, what is your authority and how do you think you have more authority than Yeshua? Yeshua is telling us to teach everyone to obey everything he said, which includes a fivefold unity to form a single foundation of apostles and prophets. And if people aren't doing that, they're scattering abroad. So all these other ministers, all these other ministries, they are scattering abroad. So if they're not teaching the people to obey all things, if they're not teaching people to enter into Yeshua's words, if they're not helping people to learn to walk and become like Yeshua, what are they doing? Because this is what Yeshua is saying to do. This is an active process. Not many people taking it up, but this is an active process. The ones that value him take it up. So the other thing, so wow, that letter. It's like, this is what I want. It was very similar to last week. We talked about the spirit of Esau. Is like, we're not going to reference scripture. This is what I want. Okay, and that's not our job. Okay, yes, we're servants, but we're servants of the Most High. Okay, so just like the tribe of Levi, when the people are wrong, when the children of Israel are wrong, you have to oppose them, or else, boys, you're not his priesthood. No way. So, Colossians 1 in verse 27, to them Elohim willed to make known what are the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles. He's talking about us, which is Messiah in you, the hope of glory. It's him that we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect in Mashiach Yeshua. Okay, now, if you're someone at my level, this is a commandment. Okay, so and I know that the messianic theology is very, very different. I never really did fit in the messianic world, but I tried to connect with messianic leaders and teachers for, oh my, 17 years spent trying to make connections, trying to talk things through with them, trying to just got nowhere. They're not interested. So we realized that Nazarene is what needs to set itself apart from that. So the messianic ministers, the dumb, greedy dogs that don't know how to bark, they don't get together unless there's something to sell. They don't get together unless there's publicity in it. Okay, they're not, and those who are aligned with the sect of the Nazarenes, if they're not teaching you how to walk like Yeshua, they're only teaching you to adore Yeshua. That's not the whole job. Okay, that's a replacement for what Yeshua taught. Okay, if you got a real minister, he's not a hireling. You've got a real minister that really cares about you, and he's trying to help you come into the original apostolic faith, just like we're all commanded. He's going to feel the need. He's going to feel the requirement to warn you and teach you in all wisdom as best as I can to present you perfect in Mashiach Yeshua. Poor dear, bless your heart. But it's so very difficult when you reject our authority in Yeshua. So you're obviously coming to us for teaching. You're coming to us for instruction. You're coming to us to learn about the kingdom. You're coming us to learn things about Yeshua, but you don't want to become like Yeshua. You don't want to walk like Yeshua. But are we seeking first his kingdom? That's the main thing. Are we seeking first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness? Not making up our own commandments, not making up our own Talmud, not reading his commandments, deciding we're not going to do them. Okay, are we actually trying to help him get the kingdom he so richly deserves? Is that our burning goal? Is that what we want to do in life? Is that what we want more than anything else? Or do we have other things that are more important to us than helping our husband get his kingdom? So this is a big job. It's not optional if we want to be called his. So I want to be loving. This question, there's other levels to analyze it at. And we just put the whining aside. So can you please talk about something else than battling with them, mercy sakes, them, about the Talmud, when, what they do, what they say? Okay, so you don't want us to establish genuine interfaith dialogue. Okay, are you aware that my computer was hijacked in 5776? That's, well, and then 5777 was 2017. So they started 2016, then 2017. Are you aware that we've had contact at that level? Or, do you know, we don't know who you are. Do you know who we are? Yeah, so do you understand that contact does exist? Do you understand the rabbis do monitor our broadcasts? Do you understand the bigger picture, or are you just focused on what you want? Okay, because I'm getting, forgive me, but I'm just going to go here from a biblical point of view. Okay, so the role of weaning in scripture is huge. So today, weaning just means that you're no longer taking milk. Now you're taking solid food. Okay, but that's not what it means biblically. Biblically, when you're weaned, that means you're capable of behaving and acting like a fully conscious and aware young adult. It's a forgotten concept. It's a very necessary concept. Okay, so some children, you talk with them, they're 4, 5, 6 years old, and you get, it's a young adult talking to you. Okay, that's weaned. Not everyone's perfect, but that's weaned. Okay, so that's necessary. Okay, if we're going to be a body, he wants a mature bride. Okay, this is not a mature comment. So Wow. And please concentrate on teaching the word. Teaching the word. Okay, please. It's like, okay, well, um, where do we begin? How do we, where do we start? So these are Shaul's instructions to Timothy in chapter 4, in 2 Timothy chapter 4, starting in verse 1. So Shaul is charging or commanding his disciple, his other apostle, Timothy, therefore, before Elohim and the Master Yeshua HaMashiach, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Okay, he said, okay, so here's a senior apostle, a senior leader's instruction to his subordinate leader: preach the word, and not just teach, preach the word. Okay, be ready in season and out of season. Okay, convince, that's more than just teach. Rebuke, it's more than just teach. Exhort, it's more than just teach. With all long suffering, okay, and also teaching. Okay, so there's a point in the teaching. You don't just, I mean, it's kind of like, what do we think this is? Is this like play on demand? Is this a jukebox? Is this like you're on your phone and play this song? What do you think this is? And why would Yeshua want a kingdom like that? How is that going to lead to a kingdom? We don't understand that. So preaching the word is much more than just teaching. So continuing in verse 3, he says, for the time will come, talking about today, when they will not endure sound doctrine, talking about the messianic movement, but according to their own desires. They're going to do what they want in these end times because they have itching ears. They like seeking out truth. They like hearing Torah tidbits. They like learning secret prophecies and things of this nature, but they don't like obeying. They don't want to enter into Yeshua's program. Okay, that's itching ears. So what do? They heap up for themselves teachers in the messianic movement. You got all kinds of wolves in sheep's clothing in the messianic movement because they're not teaching you how to imitate Yeshua. They're not helping you enter in to true corporate relationship as part of his body. So they'll heap up for themselves teachers that will sell them the truth for $29.95. They'll heap up for themselves teachers that teach that organization is not necessary. Okay, and they will turn that the Great Commission is optional, that we don't need to organize as a single body. Okay, they will turn their ears away from the truth of what Yeshua and the disciples truly say in the renewed covenant, and they'll be turned aside to fables of their own making. And that's what this person's letter was asking us for. Okay, stop teaching what you feel needs to be taught. Don't listen to Elohim. Listen to me. Give me what I want. Okay, this is not mature. That's like the level of a little crying baby that doesn't know better. Okay, so again, if you've been in Nazarene Israel for less than a year, I don't know, we don't know. So we're giving that benefit of the doubt, but just to help everyone understand, this is out there. This kind of spirit is out there, and it's a leftover remnant from Esau, because Esau is that's all he's worried about is himself. He is the center of his world, just like any baby is the center of their world. It's not good. Okay, so we left the house of Esau, allegedly, in 5278, or that's 1517 CE. Martin Luther, so he was a German monk in the church. There was only one church back then. It was the Catholic Church. And he didn't seek initially to break away from Rome. He sought to reform Rome. He had a list of 95 complaints, or what you call 95 theses. So he nailed these to the door of the church in Wittenberg, seeking to reform the Catholic Church. And he continued to seek to try to reform them until they finally started trying to kill him. And then he changed his approach. That's when the separation occurred. So there's a lot of things we could say pro and con about Martin Luther. We have a difficult relationship with him, but we'll examine that in more detail later because there's more to the story. There's more to know that's very important to know, but we can't unpack it this week. But the principle that Martin Luther used was called sola scriptura. And so if you had any kind of a theological debate, scripture had to be properly divided, properly interpreted and understood, but scripture had to be the final authority in all matters of scripture, or in all matters of theological debate. So the Catholic Church rejects that doctrine as heretical because they claim it's against the Christian character or whatever it is that they say. So maybe it is against their character to obey scripture, but that's at least the idea in Protestantism. So that is how we escape the house of Esau. So what a blessing that was. What a blessing that was. But at the very same time, also, what a curse that was. Because you used to have unity in the body, and the real purpose of fellowship is that we help refine each other. But that takes genuine relationship. And Ephraim just doesn't want relationship because relationship costs. So they just don't want relationship unless it works for them. So that's why there's so many Christians. We just go and ask for whatever we want and say, thank you, goodbye, we're gone. Do we ever think about what he wants? Do we ever think about how does he see things? Are we disciplining ourselves to listen for his voice as we go through our day, our lives? So my assistant we were talking with her about it because it was just like, wow, what a remarkable email. And so her question was, does Ephraim understand that we aren't just a convenience store? We're not there for their pleasure. We're not a restaurant. They can come in and order for free whatever they want, and they just give us their order and we have to fulfill it. Okay, do they understand that that's the role and function of a prophet? An apostle is is also. Do we understand that they have to listen for what Elohim has to teach on? I mean, does this person get it? Does his brother and sister get it? We don't know. Okay, there's also some serious concerns regarding the two houses. If you're going to talk about Judah like them, okay, it's Esau that hates both Judah and Joseph. And we may have someone who maybe they have the true knowledge, or maybe they just got taught wrong, or we don't know what. But I had some very frightening experiences with messianics who hate Judah. So I was called to repentance 5759, 1999. I think I did one Sukkot in the States, and after that, people were going to Sukkot in Jerusalem. So I got a plane ticket and went there, and that's what I did. So, but I went to another Messianic leader's Sukkot, and the first year I noticed that he had a favoritism toward Arab or Muslim merchants. So I can understand, he's on a budget, this kind of a thing, but he's preferring Arab merchants as opposed to Jewish merchants, even though there's a connection with Islam, and it's during the Intifada and this kind of a thing. And then the second year I went back to the same thing, and he just had, a lot of invective against Judah. He just had a hatred against Judah. And there's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of red horse hatred of both Joseph and Judah in the Messianic movement. So, we have to separate ourselves from Esau. We don't have a choice with that. That's the first thing we need to do, is to separate. And if people calling Judah them, okay, I mean, just to get the right attitude. So we're all great grandpa Abraham's children. People saying, Norman, you're always talking way over our head. Okay, so I'm trying to reach you. I'm trying to talk with you at your level. Okay, but you're going to have to meet me. Okay, so Yahweh's talking to Abraham. He's saying, I will bless those who bless you, and I'm going to curse him who curses you. And that includes between the two houses, between Judah and Joseph. Okay, I know we have Judah's got a curse going on. Judah. So if you go to Wikipedia and you look up the Birchat Haminim, you can read, this is the curse where Judah asks for our death 3 times each weekday, unless you're a cantor, which in case is 5 times each weekday. And they take Shabbat off from cursing us to death, which is nice. But this applies both to Nazarenes and to all other sects. So if you're not Orthodox, they're cursing you to death. Okay, so this is a direct violation of Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3. I would encourage everyone to check that page out. It's just public record. But seriously, we take this very seriously. So Bereshit, or Genesis 27 and verse 41, tells us that Esau hates Yaakov. Okay, not just Judah. He also hates Joseph, also hates Ephraim. Okay, so Esau hated Yaakov because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I will kill my brother Yaakov. Okay, he's the red horse. He's mad. It's the red horse. We need to recognize our relationship with Judah. So we've titled this the Bereshit, or the Genesis 35 in verse 11 Alliance series, because we're trying to raise awareness of the relationship between the two houses. So again, I don't know, maybe this is, they talk about children nowadays, they just directly insulting to their teachers in classrooms and this kind of a thing. Like, I don't know what you were taught. I don't know, or other people who express similar points of view that just sort of demand our time, demand that they are in charge and we need to pay attention or pay them a salary and this kind of a thing. So the whole series that we have here is the Genesis 35 Alliance series, because this is Elohim's will. So Genesis 35, verse 11, Elohim said, I am El Shaddai, Elohim El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply, a nation, which is Judah, and a company of nations. Okay, we're talking about, in this context, the Protestant Christian nations, shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body. The land to which I give Abraham and Yitzhak, I give to you and to your descendants of both houses after you, I give this land. Okay, now I'll just tell you, I am very concerned that we don't have Esau come back among our ranks. I've seen so much red horse in the house of Ephraim. I personally am against it. I personally don't want it. And I happen to know that Esau hates Israel. So it doesn't matter whether you're Judah or Joseph, Esau eventually will hate you. So when I see or hear indications of hatred towards Judah, I have to start asking myself questions. Okay, is this someone who doesn't understand? What spirit is this? Okay, because Joseph doesn't hate his brothers. Okay, that's Esau who hates his cousins. Okay, so I'm not sure how many sessions this person has seen. But again, we get this kind of question all the time. So Ezekiel, we're going to name it the Ezekiel 37 series. Ezekiel 37 and verse 16 tells us that Judah was to take a stick for himself and write on it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Okay, the children of Israel, those are those of us who defected when Jeroboam set up his golden calves. They've already done that. Judah has already done this. Okay, like have you seen Judah? Have you dealt with many Jews? Okay, do you understand how they organize? You understand how they operate together? Okay, now it says, then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. Then join them one to another for yourself into one stick, and they will become one in your hand. Notice some very special things here. Okay. The stick of Joseph has to be formed in the hand of Ephraim, okay, but it's going to get put together with the stick of Judah. And that's going to take place ultimately after Armageddon right now, which you're seeing a lot of collusion between the United States, which is the prophetic tribal area for Ephraim. There's other Ephraimite tribes. We'll talk about that in other places. We talk about that in the Nazaree Israel study. But you have to form it as a stick before you can bring it together with the stick of Judah to form one stick. Okay, and Ephraim just doesn't want to hear this. And this kind of spirit, this kind of demanding infant, like, give me what I want, how I want, when I want it. It's like, okay, and I don't know how people were raised or if they were raised, or I don't know. I don't know. But there's some very important things. And so what we're trying to say is that we are coming home, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. We've got, well, we talk in the Revelation series. There's some time yet before we come home, but it's beginning to happen. Okay, and Ephraim needs to form this stick now before we can come home. And it's what Yeshua says to do in any case. So, but when we do this, when we form this stick, Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 20 says, then Judah is going to bring all of our brethren, the house of Israel, the lost Ephraimites. They're going to bring us as an offering to Yahweh out of all nations, horses and chariots and litters, on mules and on camels. We can talk about this some other time. To my set apart mountain, Jerusalem, says Yahweh. As the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel, we'll come back to that, in the house of Yahweh, a clean vessel. That's the prophecy. We have to bring an offering in a clean vessel. Okay. In verse 21, Yahweh says, he will also take some of us, some of the Ephraimites, for priests and for Levites. That won't be me. My body's not symmetrical, but he will take some of us. Now, here's why it's a problem. Okay, we're told to bring an offering in a clean vessel. Okay, so we already know that this relationship is coming up. We already know this reunion is coming up. Are we not going to talk to Brother Jude about it? Like what? It does not compute, kind of. It's like, where do we get this? Okay, so we're going to go back home to the land. Judah presently is not obeying the Tanakh. They allegedly read it, but it's just a launching vehicle for the Talmud. Okay, this is a real relationship. We're coming back home to the land. Maybe Esau doesn't care so much about Judah, but Joseph, I would think, should care about Judah. Okay, Joseph, I would think, should care about what's going on with his brother. Okay, now, I mean, they have some programs, that the B'nai Noach program, because they don't recognize us right now. They don't recognize Joseph as Joseph. They know who we are. That's why they hijacked my computer back in 5776, 5777. Okay, that's, they know who we are. They just don't want to acknowledge who we are. and they ask for our deaths. They pray for our deaths 3 times each weekday. So 18 times each week. So every Shabbat we meet, Judah as a whole, Orthodox Judah has prayed again for our deaths, some 18 times each. So we shouldn't talk with them about this. So we've talked about their doctrine before. This is Safari, a website, Talmud Tractate of Avodah Zarah, 37a. They say some outrageous thing. The pedophilia in the Talmud is, you could cut it with a knife. Since a 9-year-old boy is fit to engage in sexual intercourse, he also imparts ritual impurity as one who experienced ziva, which would be like a syphilis or gonorrhea or unusual menstrual flow for a woman, the woman with the flow of blood. So Ravina said, therefore, with regard to a female Gentile child who is 3 years and 1 day old, since she is fit to engage in intercourse at that age, she also imparts impurity as one who experienced ziva. We're talking a 3-year-old girl. And this is holy, according to Brother Judah, Orthodox Judah. So here's Ketubot 11 in verse B. That's the backside of page 11. So Ravah said that this is what the Mishnah is saying. An adult man who engaged in intercourse with a minor girl less than 3 years old has done nothing, as intercourse with a girl less than 3 years old is tantamount to poking a finger into the eye. And they go on and on and on, justifying you can have sex with especially a Gentile girl, but you can have sex just not on her 3rd birthday, and not, there's some other rules. But it just, the justification is just, it's obscene. It's just truly disgusting. Are we not supposed to dialogue with them about this? So here's Sanhedrin 58b, and Resh Lakish says, a Gentile, and they don't recognize Ephraim, they hate Joseph. They've always hated Joseph ever since the dream. It says, a Gentile, us, who observed Shabbat, us, is liable to receive the death penalty. We're not supposed to talk about this with them. As it is stated, and day and night shall not cease. They're misquoting Genesis 8 and verse 23, which literally means, they say, a day and night, day and night, they, meaning returning Joseph, shall not rest. This is interpreted homiletically to mean that the descendants of Noah, Joseph, may not take a day of rest, because the plan is to work us to death, or at least to work the males to death. Then they have the women and the children, both male and female, just not the men. So here's Sanhedrin 58b, says the backside of page 58. And the master said, back in 57a, that their prohibition is their death penalty, meaning the punishment for any prohibition. In other words, if you break their rules regarding the Noahide laws, you die. So it says, Ravina, the prohibition with regard to the descendants of Noah is execution. So you don't do what Orthodox Judah says. You don't do what the Talmud says. You can keep the Tanakh, but they say to put you to death. Okay, so it's only if you're keeping the Talmudic rules. You're becoming a slave, just like Parasha Vayeshev. So Ravina says, if a descendant of Noah observes a day of rest on any day of the week, so Shabbat or even one not set aside for religious worship, for example, on a Monday, he is liable to die. Okay, so if you take a day of rest as a Noahide slave, you die. Okay, so Sanhedrin 59a, front side of page 59. Rabbi Yohanan says, a Gentile who engages in Torah study is liable to receive the death penalty. As it is stated, Moses commanded us a Torah, an inheritance only for the congregation of Jacob, misquoting Deuteronomy 33 and verse 4, indicating that it is an inheritance for us and not for them. Okay, not for Joseph, because they say so. So if you are new to the channel, I would encourage you to check out some of the first videos that we did. I was doing a lot of in-depth research for a documentary series that we're going to morph into something, I believe, even more timely and apropos. So this is if you check out our midrash on Parasha Vayeshev, and there's several parashiot right there clustered together, where we really put in some heavy duty information, some meat. If you're looking for some meat, and then we hope to develop that in the upcoming documentary when we get to it at the end of this year of parashiot. But Judah has had problems with Joseph ever since our forefather had the dream. Okay, I understand there's issues. I understand they're working on plans to kill us. I get it. They ask for our death 3 times each weekday. I get it. Okay, but concentrate on teaching the word. Okay, that's all you want is the word. Because I'm saying there's so much to this letter. There's so much to this letter. So, and I was reminded when I was praying about what to do for this, and, bless your heart. I mean, you need, I'm not sure, but this is when I first when I was first called to repentance back in 57, 59, 1999, and came to the Messianic movement. There were, the internet was basically just getting started. So, but kept coming across this article that would say that study was the highest form of worship. And here we have the Hebraic Christian global community. I have no idea. Then we have a lecture. This is, he'll sell you his lecture for $5 or $6 or whatever. I don't, I don't know what chapter and verse he uses to justify that, but because he's going outside of what Yeshua specifies. It's a replacement for what Yeshua says. But this idea is all over. Neither one of these is the one I first found. There's other websites. If you just search for, studying is the highest form of worship. This is a book from a Hebraic perspective. It's proven that the highest form of worship is studying his word. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. Give us a break. Okay, how about obedience? Yes, you have to study to get proper obedience, but don't just study his word. Okay, and I think this is a big problem. It's a bigger problem than most people realize. Okay, so we talked about in earlier parashiot that back in the first century, at least as recorded in scripture, you had a few believing Nazarene sects. So you had the Minha Netzarim, us, the sect of the Nazarenes, okay, and their purpose was to be sent out into the world to recover Ephraim. Okay, there's an agency relationship we'll talk about. Okay, but they kept the Torah and the prophets. They rejected the Talmud because Yeshua rejected the whole Zugot Pharisaic tradition. As you're not listening to Elohim. They're not listening to Elohim. They're not listening for his voice and doing what he said. But this is a very tight halakha. This is exactly must be Yeshua's halakha, and there's reasons for that. And then you also come up with the Pharisees who believed. So today you'd talk about one house, Messianic Talmudic Jews, and maybe they allow Gentiles in. It's very insulting. It's like, yeah, I know we were asleep for 2,000 years, but we're back on the job now, so you can go to the back of the bus. Yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing. The whole thing is very insulting. But Yeshua utterly rejected the rabbinical order. So for some reason, your Messianic Jews, the one house kind especially, they didn't get the memo. Okay, moving on. So then you have 2 different red horse groups. They're related, but they're similar, but they're different enough just to mention. So it mentions in various places you have your Hellenists or your Greeks. Okay, well, again, Esav, Edom, so you have the sequence. So Babylon, Assyria, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the legs of iron and clay. That's all Babylon. That's all mystery Babylon. You're claiming to serve Yahweh, but you're not doing what Elohim wants you to do. And I don't know how to break it to people any nicer than that. You try and tell people, okay, you're not doing what Elohim wants you to do, but it's like they don't hear you. Like they're not getting it. It's not connecting with them. I've been talking about this, been writing about this. People are not getting this. Okay, Yeshua wants one halacha, which is his. And if you want to walk together with him, you have to be agreed with him that his halacha is the one. Because why? Because he is one like Moshe. He is one who was sent to show us how to keep the Torah. So we should be imitating him in every sense. The rabbis know this. They imitate their teachers. Okay, Yeshua is our one and only rabbi. We're supposed to imitate him and do as he did. Okay, not just worship him, not just adore him, but to become more like him. There's reasons for that. We have to become like him to reestablish that single spiritual family of man that Yahweh's wanted ever since the days of the garden. Okay, so the first Esavite group that you have is group number 3 right there, the first red horse group. And so Mark 9 and verse 38, they're casting out demons in Yeshua's name, but they're not following Yeshua. They're not walking Yeshua's walk. And then you have Matthew 7, 21 through 23. You have many who will say, haven't we cast out demons in your name? Haven't we prophesied in your name? Have we done all this good stuff in your name? Done many mighty works of power in your name? And Yeshua says, I don't know you. You're not helping me to build my kingdom the way I say to do it. Goodbye. Goodbye. Okay, and then you've got your Gnostics. Today you get your Messianistics. So that's 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 20. The whole idea is it's enough to know that Yeshua is the Messiah. You don't have to do anything. And that sounds very much compatible with the spirit that our author wrote in. Okay, you just tell me, I don't want any relationship with Judah. I don't want to establish two-house relationships. I don't want anything to do with Genesis 35 alliance. I don't really care about a stick of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim. I don't really care about anything Elohim wants. I just want you to tell me what I need to know, because knowing is enough. And I don't know how many people I've met in the Ephraimite movement with this delusion. And it is the Gnostic, for as far as I can tell, it is the same Gnostic spirit, because all you have to do is know. It's all based on intellect. You just know, and then that's all there is. And we don't care anything about relationships between the two houses. But if you're going to take that approach, what do you do with Luke chapter 7 and verse 36? Okay, then one of the Pharisees, one of the Orthodox, asked him to eat with him, and he went to the Pharisee's house and sat down to eat. Now, there's this whole backstory, this whole drama going on there. But what do we suppose they talked about over dinner? Nothing. They're both there in a religious context. They didn't talk about Judah's actual the Pharisees' actual practices versus what the Tanakh says. That's everything Yeshua talked about. So, then you have Matthew chapter 26, starting in verse 11. Okay, Yeshua is saying to his disciples, okay, I want you to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Orthodox and the Karaites. Okay, then they understood he didn't tell them to beware of physical leaven, but to beware of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Okay, are you aware of what is the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Okay, do you know what is the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Because if you don't, then why are you resisting this instruction? Okay, we're told to beware of it, so we need to know something about it so we can spot it when it shows itself and point it out to others to stay away from it. But if you're going to stop up your ears because someone's trying to help you to understand what to beware of, I mean, it's making the relationship very difficult. Your brother or sister, not sure. Uh, some liquid. And I guess it's of concern that just the prospect of, I mean, just the way of talking about brother Judah. Why are we talking to them? So, Vayikra or Leviticus 19 verse 17, it's very clear. Okay, we're not supposed to hate our brother. We're supposed to rebuke our brother. We're supposed to help our brother understand what's really going on and therefore not bear sin because of him. And I don't know how many people I've met who have hatred in their hearts for brother Judah. And I do understand that there's problems. I have had my computer hijacked. Okay. I understand that they want us all dead. Okay. But there's more to the story. And there's a job for us to do at various different levels. So, what are we supposed to do? Not dialogue with Brother Judah? Is that the way you would want someone to treat you? Is to not talk with you? If there was something that you were doing that was wrong, you would want someone not to correct you? Because that's basically what you're saying. Don't discipline me. Don't train me. Don't disciple me. Don't correct me. Don't love me, is what you're really saying. Because love in the Hebraic mindset, in Esavite term, love means let me do whatever I want. But in Hebraic context, love means help me walk in Yahweh's ways, rebuke me when I'm wrong, discipline me when I'm wrong. So, again, I know there are problems. It is explained in the Brit Chadasha. So, Romans chapter 11, starting in verse 28, we know that the Orthodox, they are enemies for our sake physically. They pray for our death, but that won't be always. Concerning the election, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers, for the gifts and the calling of Elohim are irrevocable. He's got the two houses on different paths. We believe it's time for them to start communicating. Judah's not communicating openly with us, but there are people who do listen to truth. So now people have questions about this. So, for example, people bring, and we'll see this again in this week, later in the Brit Chadasha section. So come to Maaseh or Acts chapter 13, starting in verse 46. Okay, so Shaul and Barnabas grew bold and said, okay, it was necessary that the word of Elohim should be spoken to you first. Okay, but since you reject it, and you're judging yourselves unworthy to enter into the relationship that's going to lead to everlasting life, we're done. Behold, we turn to the Gentiles. Okay, so people look at this in other verses like Acts 18 and verse 6. Okay, so when they opposed Shaul and blasphemed, he shook his garments and said to them, your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles. And people say, well, why are we still, see, Shaul said, that's two witnesses right there. He said, he's done with Judah. He's not going to go to Judah anymore. From now, he goes to the Gentiles. Okay. We need to take this in the greater overall context of Scripture. We need to understand the full counsel of Scripture. Okay, let's read what Shaul wrote. So in Romans chapter 1 and verse 16, he says, for I am not ashamed of the good news of Mashiach, for it is the power of Elohim to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first, and also for the Greek. Okay, so does that seem like he's done with Judah? Okay, so Romans 2 in verse 6, we're told that Elohim is going to render to each one according to his deeds. Verse 9, tribulation and anguish will be poured out on every soul of man who does evil, of the Jew first, and also of the Greek. Yahweh disciplines his people first. Like it or not, when we were off in the nations, Judah was still there with Elohim. Not walking perfectly, but he was still there with Elohim. And that counts for something. We'll talk about that later in this presentation. Verse 10, but glory, honor, and peace to everyone who works what is good. Again, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. So Judah is still with him. So Judah gets judged first. So Romans 11, starting in verse 11, he says, I say then, has Judah stumbled that they should fall? Certainly not, but they did fall. And through their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to the Gentiles. Now, we need to talk about this. Let's finish the verse. Now, if their fall is riches for the world and their failure is riches for the Gentiles, how much more then will be their fullness? Okay, so what we're talking about here is that ultimately and one day, Judah also will be called into the covenant. Now, we show in the Revelation study or Revelation Simplified on YouTube, we show that takes place at Armageddon. But we need to differentiate ourselves very carefully from Esau. And Esau hates and depreciates, devalues Judah. And we understand that the white horse, typically it's about 10%. So we understand we'll be losing about 90% viewers, we don't care, by separating from Esau. But if you don't separate from Esau, you didn't separate from Esau. And Esau is to be destroyed. So people need to take very seriously the warning that Shaul is giving us here. Okay, so our job, it says here in verse 11, our job is to provoke Judah to jealousy through the operation of the Spirit of Yeshua. Okay, and people say, well, what does that look like? Okay, and what that looks like is the Great Commission. What that looks like is all the ministers working together on a single foundation of apostles and prophets. Okay, so, and what Shaul's heart here, so he continues, verse 13, he says, for I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry. If by any means I may provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh and save some of them. For if their being cast away is the reconciling of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? And if our job is to provoke Judah to jealousy, we're not there yet, brothers. Okay, when I talk to Orthodox Jews, okay, there's all sorts of things that they laugh about the house of Ephraim, just all sorts of things that we're just not doing. Okay, there's things that Judah does that we don't do. Okay, that doesn't work. So there's just so much wrong with the spirit that's behind this. It's just one of these things. We spent all week talking about it just because there's so many people, I think, in the Messianic movement that just still don't understand the need to separate from Esau and to purify and cleanse themselves from Esau. So you're no longer pink horse, but pure, clean, scrubbed white horse. So I don't know. There's just so much wrong with that letter. 1 John, Yohanan Aleph, chapter 2, starting in verse 9. He who says he's in the light with Yeshua, but he's still hating his brother Judah, he is in darkness until now. And he who loves his brother Judah abides in the light, even though Judah curses us. Okay, but we are not to return hatred for hatred. We're to turn the other cheek and give love. If we love, there's no cause for stumbling. Verse 11, but he who hates his brother is in darkness and walks in darkness and does not know where he is going because the darkness has blinded his eyes. And I got to tell you, I just know from talking with people that if you point out their email to them, very often they'll say, well, that's not what I don't feel hatred for them in my heart. It's like, how do you refer to them? Why would you not want to know what your brother is doing? I mean, do you understand the two houses and that we're coming home and that these are relationships that after Armageddon, the two houses will become one? I mean, do we understand that? And if so, why, what is the hatred? What is that? Why is hatred? We just don't get it. And I think if people can take a moment to recognize the truth that Yeshua says, we just need to put him and his kingdom first before we think we know anything at all about theology. Because that's the whole point. Yahweh sent his son Yeshua to establish the kingdom that would have been built if we hadn't fallen down in the garden. So we rejected Yahweh as king over us. We rejected Yahweh's authority. We rejected the covenant of Sinai. So here's Yeshua giving us yet another chance. And what he tells us to do is we have to put his kingdom first and his righteousness, meaning his commandments. We have to put those things first. And his kingdom, his rules, his righteousness, they all talk about doing things decently and in order. Not just a vending machine. People don't just make demands at you, and it's our job to fulfill. I mean, it's like a tantrum from a 3-year-old, effectively. So, if you're new, just sort of take this in stride. I mean, understand the importance of this teaching, but don't let it affect you so much. But if you have been around Nazarene Israel for a year or more, wow, that's quite the letter. That's quite the letter. So Yohanan or John chapter 7, starting in verse 17, Yeshua tells us, if anyone wills to do his Father's will, to do Yahweh's will, then he's going to know concerning the doctrine, whether what Yeshua is saying comes from Elohim or whether he's speaking on his own authority. Okay, and he has all authority. But is it from Elohim or not from Elohim? The key is you have to want to know what Yahweh wants, and you have to want to help Yahweh get what he wants, or you won't understand. Okay, so with this question, verse 18, you didn't cite Yahweh's authority. You didn't seem interested in Yahweh's authority. And verse 18 says, he who speaks from himself seeks his own glory. But he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. So what that means is we need to seek not our own glory. We need to seek not what's good and right in our own eyes. We need to take a step back and see what Elohim has going on and who is the prophet he's using to speak to his people, and not cut ourselves off through willful ignorance by not entering in. And I guess finally, so Galatim chapter 6 and verse 3, if you're new, just take it in stride. But if anyone thinks of himself to be something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. Again, if you're new to this walk, then please don't allow yourself to be discouraged. But if you basically consider yourself established in this walk, then I challenge you to pray about this, because what we're hearing is fruit of a wrong spirit. So What we're hearing is someone who's coming around and they feel authorized or entitled to tell us what to do and how to do it. And that's a messianic spirit, and it's a very aggressive messianic spirit. So again, we don't know whether you're brother or sister or what's your heart in this matter, but what we're saying is, what we're seeing is fruit that is not clean. You're taking the high place effectively. You're coming in demanding that we do certain things for you when you have no such authority. And if you did have that authority, you'd be speaking in accordance with the Spirit and not in accordance with your own desires. So I say that in love. So now we come to our Torah portion. And what we're going to see is that if you are called, you might get sent. And if you are sent, you're going to have a mission to fulfill. You're going to have a mission to perform. Okay, so shelach. Okay, so we take a look at the root. It's Strong's Hebrew Concordance 7971. Shelach. This is the root. It means to send away or to send out. In other words, to send on a mission, to send for a purpose, to send for a reason. Okay, now, does anything Yahweh does it fail? Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 55 and verse 11, Yahweh says, "So shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish what I please, and it shall prosper in the thing for which I sent it." So if Yahweh sends us, we need to be prosperous. We need to be successful in the mission he's sent us to do for him. Now we saw, I believe 2 weeks ago in, Parasha Naso, we saw that Joseph was a Nazir. He was sent out not of his own volition. We saw Strong's Hebrew 5139 was Nazir. It's from 5144. It means separate. It means consecrated. It means dedicated. But it's separated for a purpose, just as Joseph was separated for a purpose. And that's why we read in Bereshit or Genesis 45, starting in verse 4, Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." So they came near. Then he revealed himself. He said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. You did evil to us, just like the disciples would later be sent out of the nation of Israel. They would proclaim the Birchat Haminim over us and drive us out from the Commonwealth of Israel, or drive us underground, or however, we'll talk about that in other places. Okay, so Judah, Levi, Shimon, they wanted to kill us. Judah got the big idea. There's more money selling him than killing him. Okay, so, but in general, Judah sold us into Egypt. Okay, but don't be therefore grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For Elohim sent me before you to preserve life. Okay, now when we think in geopolitical terms, we think about the world political scene today. We think about Christian Zionists coming to the aid of Jewish Zionists to establish an Israelite presence again in the land. Okay, so if we can see the parallels at the Genesis 35 and verse 11 alliance level. Okay, continuing on, verse 7. He says, "And Elohim sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by means of a great deliverance." So therefore, now it wasn't you who sent me here, but Elohim, ultimately, who sent me here. And he's made me a father to Paro, and a master of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Okay, so Yahweh uses his people. His people are his hands and his feet, willing or unwilling, witting or unwitting, obedient or disobedient. But ultimately, it's Yahweh who's doing all these things. Ultimately, it's Yahweh who sent our forefather Joseph into the dispersion. Ultimately, it's Yahweh who had the disciples driven out of the Commonwealth of Israel, from the Commonwealth of Judah, and driven out into the world to help bring back lost Ephraim. Okay, so let's come to Genesis, Bereshit 49 and verse 26. So there's a blessing to all this. When something happens to you and you suffer, Elohim has a blessing in mind. Okay, so he says, here's our forefather Israel speaking to Joseph, saying, the blessings of your father there's different ways to interpret that, have excelled the blessings of my ancestors up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. Okay, all these blessings shall be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of him who was separated from his brothers. And that word is Nazir. Okay, and the point is that we made before, you can be separated. It can be a voluntary vow or it can be an involuntary vow. It can be something Elohim sends you into. Okay, but if he calls you and then he sends you, you have a mission to fulfill for him. You have a purpose. You have something to do for him. Okay, so now let's come to the Torah portion itself. So Bamidbar, or Numbers 13, starting in verse 2, Yahweh says, send men. Okay, so Shelach, send men, Shelach lakad, send men for yourself to spy out the land of Canaan, for which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man. We'll talk about that some other time. Everyone a leader among them. Okay, so Moshe obviously called them, gathered them, informed them, trained them, equipped them, and then sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of Yahweh, all of them men who were realistically heads of the children of Israel. These were the leaders. Now, there's two that are of note, again, in context of the Genesis 35 and verse 11 alliance, in context of the two houses, in context of the need to form the stick of Ephraim. So verse 6, from the tribe of Judah, there was Caleb, the son of Yefuneh. Okay, so there's the house of Judah. Then verse 8, and from the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun. Now, verse 16, Moshe called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Yehoshua, or Yahushua. We have a whole study on that in Nazarene Scripture Studies, Volume 1. We need to update the study, but the basic information is all still accurate and correct. So Moshe called Hoshea, meaning salvation, Yehoshua or Yahushua. So Yahweh saves. Okay, it's the same name as Yeshua's name. Okay, drop your Nachmanides marker there. Let's come to Bamidbar 13 and verse 27. So the spies go out, the spies come back. Okay, then they told him and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. And they hold up this enormous cluster of grapes. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Okay, so the Anakim are the giant clans. That's a whole separate discussion. So the people don't want to go. The people think it's too big for us. It's too great for us. We can't do it. Verse 30, Caleb jumps up. Caleb quieted the people before Moshe and said, let us go up at once and take possession of it, for we are well able to overcome it, because Yahweh is on our side. When we're with Yahweh, Yahweh was with us. And who can stand against Yahweh? Verse 31, but the men who had gone up with him said, no, we're not able to go up against the people, for they're stronger than we are. So can we see our attitudes today in this passage in the house of Ephraim? Okay, it's too hard for us to enter into the renewed covenant. We can't do it. It'd be better us to stay in the Messianic movement. It's kind of like going back to the church, staying back in the church. Chapter 14 and verse 1. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained. There's that word again. We're building up to Korach's rebellion next week. It's just complaining. Okay, just like the YouTube comment that we saw. Complaining. Okay, Yahweh's program is being offered. The people are complaining. They don't want Yahweh's program. Okay, can't you give us a Congress of churches? Can't you give us a jukebox? Can't you just feed us the way we want to be fed? We don't like the strained peas. We want the applesauce. Okay, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness instead of being called to help Yahweh establish his kingdom for his son, so that we can reestablish the conditions on earth that we should have been living under ever since the Garden of Eden. Okay, so we want to be the bride, we just don't want to help our husband. Okay, this is the big problem in Israel. Verse 3. And if you think about this in the context of your life, where you have to obey the renewed covenant, and you know it costs, and you know it takes time, and you know it takes money, and you know it takes effort, and you know it takes your focus, and you're no longer sovereign over yourself. Now you're a willing servant. You're a willing slave. You signed up for slavery because you like it better. So our forefathers, who also didn't want to enter into the covenant, who also didn't want to obey the specifics, who also wanted to be the bride, but didn't want the help, said, why has Yahweh brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? And this is what we have in the Messianic movement when people don't want to come out of the church system. They want to play house church. Why? Because it's free, because it's easy. Everyone feels important. You get to speak every week. Okay, but are you helping to build the kingdom? Are you doing what you can to help establish Yahweh's kingdom, Yahweh's way? Or are you saying, no, let's elect a leader and return back to the church system? Let's go back to a Presbyterian or a Congregationalist house church model, okay, where everyone's equal. We're going to talk all about Korach's rebellion next week. Verse 5. Moshe and Aharon fell on their faces before the assembly, but now Yehoshua ben Nun and Caleb, son of Yefuneh, represented the house of Ephraim and the house of Judah, respectively, were among those who had spied out the land. And they tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, no, stop, wait. The land we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. Look at the grapes. If Yahweh delights in us, if we do the things that make Yahweh happy and he's joyful, he delights in us, he has all the power. He's going to bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. He's going to take care of this whole thing for us. Okay. And I wonder, do people in the renewed covenant, do we think about this? If we will do what Yahweh says and he delights in us, he's going to take care of the whole thing. Do we think about that? Can we see ourselves in our forefathers? Okay, verse 9, he says, only do not rebel against Yahweh, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread, they're our sustenance. Their protection has departed from them, and Yahweh is with us. Don't fear them. And all the congregation said to stone them with stones. What happens today in the Messianic movement if you suggest that you have to actually do the things that are written in the renewed covenant, like we had last week with the spirit of Asaph writing us, telling us there's no way you can say it's Yahweh's way or the highway. No, you've got to have something where the people are involved. You've got to have something where the people are enfranchised. No, you've got to have some kind of a democratic process. Well, here we go with the democratic process. Here comes Yahweh in verse 11. Yahweh said to Moshe, how long will these people reject me? Okay, when you hear what Yahweh's covenant says to do and you choose not to do it, or you don't choose to do it, you're rejecting him. You're rejecting his plan. You're rejecting his program. You're rejecting his kingdom. You're rejecting him as your king and your sovereign. It says, and how long will they not believe me with all the signs that I have already performed among them? I've shown them all this stuff. Still, they don't get it. Now, I don't know if other people have seen signs. I've seen things I can't explain any other way except that Yahweh is sovereign over all the earth. So verse 20, Moshe gets involved, says, please pardon these people according to the greatness of your kindness. So Yahweh said, I have pardoned according to your word. But truly, as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of Yahweh. Because all these men who have seen my glory, they've seen the signs which I did in Egypt. They've seen the signs in the wilderness, and they've put me to the test these 10 times. And what is it? Again, he mentions again and again and again. They're not listening to me. They're not listening to me. They're not listening to my voice. They're not doing what I want them to do. They signed up to be my bride. They don't want to do it. They don't want to help. They don't want to listen to me. It's like you're talking to your bride. She's like, do you hear something? Verse 23, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. We're going to come back to that in the Brit Chadasha portion. Rejecting him by not entering in, not choosing to enter in, failing to choose to enter in. But my servant Caleb, representative of the house of Judah, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring him into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. Okay, that's why Judah is in the land of Israel today. The stick of Judah is in the land of Israel today, and the stick of Joseph first has to form, first has to get rid of all the rebellious Asavite attitudes, first has to clean itself up so its garment is without spot, wrinkle, or blemish, or tainting of pink. First needs to clean up its own backyard and get its own act together, and then it can form into a stick, and then and only then it can be joined together with the stick of Judah, which is already in the land of Israel. Okay, there will be punishment coming upon the United States. There will be punishment, severe punishment, coming upon the land of Israel to cleanse it, but there will be a continuing presence. They're going to pay a dear, heavy cost, a heavy, heavy price for that. But nonetheless, the stick of Joseph is the one that needs to form still and needs to be joined together with the stick of Judah, which will remain in the land. A lot of Ephraimites have to get that straight, have to get that into their heads, have to wrap their minds around that. Okay, the land was given to Caleb, to Judah, for many different reasons. Verse 29, Yahweh says, the carcasses of you who have, there's that word, complained against me. You didn't want my program. You wanted a pop-up ministry doll. You wanted, how come you don't dance to the tune I sing, Yahweh? How come you don't serve me like a genie in a bottle? The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness. All of you who were numbered according to your entire number from 20 years old and above, and you wanted a congress of churches or something. Okay, the only ones that get to come into the land are the ones that want my program, the ones that want to do things the way I say to do them. Notably, verse 30, Caleb, the son of Yefune, who jumped right up and said, no, we can do it. We can do it. Yahweh's with us. We can do it. And Joshua, the son of Nun, who was right there with him the second time, but Caleb jumped up first. You shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. Because why? Because you didn't want my program. The kingdom of heaven was offered. You didn't want my program. I take offense. I feel rejected. Verse 39, then Moshe told these words to all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And they rose early in the morning and went up to the top of the mountain, saying, here we are, and we will go up now to the place which Yahweh has promised, for we have sinned. So we're going to do the thing that we should have done yesterday, but time has moved on. So verse 41, Moshe said, Now, why do you transgress the command of Yahweh? You're not listening to his voice. You're not under direction from him. You're still self-guided. You're still mental. You're still following your thoughts instead of following your hearing. You're not getting it. Do not go up, lest you be defeated by your enemies. For Yahweh is not among you, because you are not among Yahweh. You are not seeking to be with him, therefore he is not with you. You're self-guided, self-directed. You're writing your own Talmud. It's not going to work for you. Verse 43, because the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and you shall fall by the sword, because you have turned away from Yahweh. You haven't stayed with Yahweh, so Yahweh's not going to stay with you. But they wrote their own Talmud. They codified their own oral Torah, and then they presumed to go up to the mountaintop. Presumed means they took it upon themselves to go up to the mountaintop. Yahweh didn't direct it. They did this on their own. And I want to say this with respect. I've met some settlers who I feel are very dedicated people. They believe in their cause. They believe in what they're doing. And I had one of the settler community leaders tell me one time, he says, Yahweh has already told us to take the land. So what, kind of like what? Do we want to make him repeat himself? He already told us to take the land. So how many times does he have to tell us? So that was his attitude towards this thing. Okay, I want to invite your attention to this passage. Okay, you can still follow the commandment from yesterday. If that's not what Yahweh is commanding today, you're going to have a problem on this deal. Okay, just to think about that. Okay, the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and you shall fall by the sword, because you have turned away from Yahweh. You're following yesterday's command. Yahweh will not be with you. But they presume to go up to the mountaintop. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Nevertheless, neither the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh nor Moshe departed from the camp. And there's plenty of arguments against this verse, because Yahweh himself is the one who reestablished the nation of Israel, born in one day in 1948. So this sword cuts both ways. But that's what I want you to see, is that the sword cuts both ways. That's the main point. So we come to chapter 15 and verse 27. Let's cover some more things before we move on to the Haftarah. As long as we're here, especially for the house of Ephraim, we need to see this. If a person sins unintentionally, okay, that means you didn't know. Okay, someone taught you wrong. Your mom and dad didn't tell you. Your pastor didn't tell you. Your rabbi didn't tell you. The TV didn't tell you. Okay, if a person sins unintentionally, he didn't know, and then he shall bring a female goat in its first year as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for the person who sins unintentionally. When he sins unintentionally, he didn't know it. It's still a sin. Okay, he didn't know it was a sin, but it's still a sin. Okay, I think this is hard for Ephraim to wrap his mind around sometimes. Okay, you have to make atonement for that. And if you make that atonement, it will be forgiven you. Okay, and I think this is, again, what we've seen in the last two weeks worth of comments, is people having a self-centric focus. Kind of like when babies are first born, they don't have any consciousness of anything or anyone outside of themselves. And then you have the little mobile there, and then you have mom's face appears once in a while, and once in a while you see dad, and those are happy. You like seeing your parents, you like, this kind of thing. And as you grow, you have to come to an awareness that, yes, other people there are other people in this world, and that I am not the center of the world. That's part of the weaning process that I guess very few people get blessed with today. Since the breakup of the two-parent household, weaning itself has kind of gone by the wayside. Even sometimes when the mom is in the home, weaning goes by the wayside. So this is a process. Well, we'll talk about it in more detail as we go along, but this is a time for Ephraim to be purifying himself. Okay, there are a lot of things we didn't know. First we were pagans. Okay, first we were slaves. We were getting whipped. Then we get threatened to be scourged. Then we ran away. Then Jeroboam set up golden calves for us. The good ones of us left, the dumb ones of us went into the Assyrian diaspora to be mixed in with all the Gentile nations of the world. Now we're coming back. And it's like, wow, I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know. And isn't there something in the Ephraimite mindset where it's like, oh, thank you, Yahweh, period. And that's it. It's like, oh, thank you for showing me that I was doing that all wrong, period. And we don't stop to realize that there's a commandment to make an atonement. So, I mean, just think about it. If you had a job, let's say you work at a company and there's something you weren't doing, and then your boss shows you in love, hey, you need to be doing this also. Oh, thank you. Okay. Don't you need to at least say sorry? I mean, don't you need to do something? If it's a serious mistake, don't you need to do something, say something to set it right? Okay, this understanding, like Ephraim tends to think about everything in terms of himself, because Ephraim doesn't tend to think in terms of a stick yet. And that's why Ephraim doesn't have a country yet. It's because Ephraim's a big bunch of individuals. Instead of a stick, we've got a scattering of sawdust is what we have. Okay, so we need to think and pray in the direction of corporate atonement. Okay, we'll talk about this. Verse 30, but the person who does anything presumptuously, okay, that means they just took it upon themselves, whether he's a native born or a stranger, whether he's Jewish or Gentile, Judah or Joseph, doesn't matter. Okay, that one brings reproach on Yahweh. Okay, he's not respecting Yahweh. He's not setting Yahweh apart. He's trying to pull one over on the commander in chief. Okay, and because of that attitude, because he's thinking he gets to pull one over on the commander in chief, he shall be cut off from among his people. Verse 31. And that's because he has despised the word of Yahweh. Okay, that's not loving Yahweh with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your strength. You say, but it's my time, it's my money. I mean, I worked hard for that. Oh, in free time, I have to have my free time. I have to watch my TV shows. I have to go do what I do with my friends. You got to understand, there's things that are more important than building Yahweh's kingdom. Okay, if that's our attitude, no, we have to build a congress of churches. Okay, no, if that's our attitude, okay, no, you teach me what I want to know when I want to know it. If that's our attitude, okay, we're just not getting it. Okay, that's considered despising the word of Yahweh. That's breaking his commandment. It's rejecting Yahweh. Okay, it's not a submissive attitude. It's not a Proverbs 31 bride attitude. And what does he want to marry that for? Come on. I mean, we're competing with like Moshe, Shaul, Eliyahu. This is the level we need to be competing at, so to speak. Shaul says, do you not know that all those who run a race indeed all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. Okay, if we're not showing Yahweh that kind of attitude, and it's not dependent upon, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but it's the dedication, it's the zeal in action that he's looking for. And if we're not willing to show him that, okay, so we start doing things presumptuously, it brings reproach on Yahweh, and Yahweh doesn't like it. He promises to cut off people who demonstrate this kind of attitude. So can you see why we get so concerned when we receive comments like this on the YouTube, which they're repeat comments? It indicates to us that I don't know what percent, but a large chunk of the house of Ephraim doesn't get it in that way. And as long as we're here, we should also talk about the commandment regarding tzitzit. So come to Bamidbar 15 and verse 38. Yahweh says, to speak to the children of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a blue thread in the tassels of the corners. And there's many different interpretations on this, and we're not going to have time to unpack it completely, but we just want to talk about our understanding here in Nazarene Israel, because it's different than the mainstream Orthodox interpretation. So we look up this word tassel. It's Strong's Hebrew Concordance 6734. It's seed. It's a feminine of 6731. It's referring to a floral, flowery, or a wing-like projection. Okay, in other words, a forelock of hair or a tassel. Okay, so a ponytail, a braid, a fringe, a lock, something on that order. Okay, now there's another commandment we'll look at in future parashiot. I don't know what will bring, what else is in that parasha right there, but it says, you shall make tassels on the four corners of the clothing with which you cover yourself. Now, it's worth noting briefly, we don't have time to unpack the whole thing, but that's a different word. Okay, so Strong's Hebrew Concordance 1434, gedil, is from 1431 in the sense of twisting. Okay, twisting or wrapping. So thread that is a tassel, again, or a festoon, a decoration of some kind, a fringe or a wreath. Okay, now in rabbinic opinion, this comes from Wikipedia on the article on Techelet, which means the blue. So, but this is different wrapping traditions, different wrapping patterns that they use. So they have some from Rambam. He has two different patterns: Ben Ish Chai, the Ari, so a Kabbalistic pattern, Ravad, Hinuk. So this kind of a thing. And you can, those who are in the know, you can go down the street and you can tell a lot what a person believes by the way they tie their tzitzit. So I would go to Israel, and the first few times I went, I was using the 10-5-6-5 Sephardic wrapping pattern because that's just what I picked up. That's what was in the movement when I came to the movement in 57-59 or 1999. And in any event, Judah, just to bring Ephraim up to speed, Judah treats clothing like a uniform. Okay, so the way you dress indicates who you are. If you wear this kind of a hat, you belong to that kind of a sect. If you wear this kind of a robe, you have this kind of a belief. If your tzitzit are tied this way or that way, it means this or that. And they place extreme importance on all these things. So if you have your tying pattern and so you've tied your knots, and this one, this cord breaks or that cord breaks, it means this or it means that. So we don't get into anything like that in the house of Ephraim. So, but notice one thing. So they take very seriously the commandment that you have to put a tassel. So you'll see you have a hole at the top of the slide here. All the tassels, they've made a hole in the garment, and then they physically tie. They put a tassel with a thread of blue. And I suppose that is an interpretation. That is a way you can do it. Again, we don't have time to unpack the whole thing here. We take a different approach. We're going to take an integrated tassel. We're going to weave it right into the garment for reasons we'll have to explain in other places. But we read the commandment, speak to the children of, and you can put it. That's not our emphasis. Our emphasis is to put a thread of blue and to look on it and to know what it means and to live it. That's our point. So it says, speak to the children of Israel, tell them to make tassels. Now, when you have a standard woven garment, you have tassels on the end because you just tie the thread. So we know there's going to be a tassel. We're trying to recreate the ancient simla. A lot of Messianics don't know this. The talit is, or what they call the 2nd century talit. It was created in the 2nd century. It's not an ancient garment. Yeshua wouldn't have known it. Yeshua would have known more just the simla. It's a big rectangular wrap, or he would have known a poncho style talit, something like this. The very common, very accessible garments. So we put the thread of blue and we weave it right in if you're going to do it in that fashion. Or you can also put a thread of blue in the tassels of the corner. You can do it either way. For example, this was a prototype garment. I wear this one during the week. The weather's slightly cooler here, so I put it on in the evenings when I'm cold, and that's when I wear it. And then I take a look at it, and I try to remember throughout my whole day. And I don't, try not to forget. Just if I'm, because you can't always wear a garment. We'll take a look at that. But I don't know if you can see this, but I actually, in this prototype, we didn't have a blue band on the edge, so I physically put a thread of blue. Okay, so we don't follow any particular tying patterns. We're not interested. If you like those tying patterns, I want to say this the correct way. Judah doesn't like it when Ephraim wears his clothing. So it becomes a question like, well, is it really their clothing? This is the commandment of Elohim. So what are we supposed to do here? I mean, you guys have a workable combination. We're not supposed to use it. So we have a different situation. Judah is a lot of office workers, a lot of people, when you work in an office, you can have long tassels and this kind of a thing. And if one of them snags on a chair or a piece of furniture or something, it's not the end of the world. You pull out your manual and you see, oh, well, that one broke, so it means this. We have a lot of people who are in the more, we do have office workers, we do have professionals. We also have a lot of people who do manual labor jobs. Fishermen, you're not necessarily wearing all of your clothing when you're fishing. So these kinds of things. A mechanic, you don't want a bunch of dangly cords. It could cause a physical accident. So the point for us is to have the tassel and have a thread of blue to follow Elohim's commandment. So to bring Christians up to speed, so you have the Ashkenaz community, and they believe you have to wear the tassels all the time. So just like Shaul said he was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, according to the strictest sect of their religion, he would have been more of, I don't want to say the Ashkenaz variety because that didn't exist at that point in time, but that very rigid, must perform the physical letter of the commandment, or rather the physical letter of the interpretation. Okay, that's more the Ashkenaz school. The Sephardic school, they're like, when you cover yourself with the tallit, it needs to have a thread of blue. I hope I'm expressing that correctly. I don't want to mischaracterize anything, but our point is to have the thread of blue. And why? So Yahweh says in verse 39, why are we doing this? He says, and you shall have the tassel that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of Yahweh and do them. Okay, and a lot of Messianics think, okay, as long as I put tassels, I don't have to submit to the Spirit, right? I don't have to operate as part of a single body, right? Okay, that's not it. Okay, you need to look on the tassel and remember to be a functioning part of his body. We look on the tassel to remember to keep all of his commandments, that we might help build his kingdom, rather than follow the harlotry to which our own heart and our own eyes are inclined, because we have our own ideas. We have our own Talmud. We have our own halachot. We have our own Congress of Churches we'd like to promote. We have our own jukebox we'd like to punch and learn what we want to learn. We don't want to conform ourselves to Yahweh's way. We don't want to help build Yahweh's kingdom. We want to build our own kingdoms and get credit. Okay, so what I do when I see the thread of blue, I remember, Yahweh, thank you for helping me to be a servant. Thank you for helping me to submit to you so that I might want to do all of your commandments and be set apart unto you. When I look at the tzitzit, I remember this is my servant reminder. This is, Norman, you are not a sovereign. You are a servant. You were created to be a gardener. And your forefathers blew it. And then you were invited back again at Mount Sinai, and your forefathers blew it. And Yeshua came and died. And then the disciples were sent out into the world. Okay, and we've been blowing this thing all along. We've been messing this all up. This is my reminder, Norman, submit to Yahweh, enter his program, do things his way. Okay, that's what I get. And you see all these other messianics, and they want to wear tassels, and that's their excuse why they get to buy and sell books and tapes and things like this. And then they're all wrapped up, they're straining out a gnat and they're swallowing a camel. So and then they talk about this shade of blue and that shade of blue, and tie it this way and tie it this way, tie it that way. It's like, are we establishing his kingdom? Or are we living our lives in the world in Yeshua's name? Is Ephraim body home? So and then people argue about the color of blue. It's an important topic. We don't have time to unpack it here. We believe ancient indigo was it for reasons we explain on the website. There's a camp that says that you should use the Murex trunculus sea snail, and now it's called the Hepaplex trunculus sea snail. So Murex trunculus is out, Hexaplex trunculus is in. So you can see this sea snail. It's found on an Israeli coastal plain near Tel Aviv. I believe this is a Wikipedia image. Yeah, Wikipedia there. And so you can sort of see that the flesh is blue. And so what they do then is they take that out and then crush the snail, and there's a mucus in there. So the sea snail snot, effectively, you put it in contact with wool and it will turn the wool blue. In the right combination, I'm not an expert on the subject, but in the right combination of sunlight and conditions, it will also turn purple. So, but you can do a Wikipedia search for wool techelet and then JPG, and then you can track back from there, or just search for techelet, and that'll show you. Now, there's only one problem, and there's several problems with this techelet sea snail theory. One of which is found in the clean food laws in Vayikra, or Leviticus chapter 11, starting in verse 10. And that is where Yahweh tells us that of everything that lives in the seas and the rivers, if it does not have fins and scales, it's an abomination to you. Okay, so, and they shall be an abomination to us. We shall not eat their flesh, and we shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. Okay, so, and I've promoted the blue sea snail blue dye in the past just because it was found on the Temple Mount. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that's what they used back in Sinai. That means that's what they were using in the days of the Second Temple, which we already know is corrupted, or else why did Yahweh destroy it and send Judah back out into the Roman exile? So it says right here, you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination, and we're going to use that to make our set apart garments. Okay, that doesn't make sense. And just a quick word here about the tzitzit on the belt loops. A lot of people have questions about that. I don't particularly have anything against tzitzit on the belt loops, just because if you go to Wikipedia and do a search on the, I hope I'll pronounce this right, the AAMU, AAMU, and do a separate search on the Hyksos, and those are two, they believe, potentially suspected Israelite groups that were in relation to Egypt, ancient Egypt. This could have been our forefathers. These particular groups, they wore what looked to be tzitzit. So, I mean, if that's an accurate depiction, it doesn't look to be all blue. It looks like blue and red and blue. I'm not sure how that works back in ancient times. But the point is, they've got some kind of a symbol of authority on their head, and they've got a tassel. So why would they do that? It's not a functional thing. With regard to tzitzit on the belt loops, I don't really particularly have anything against it. It doesn't look particularly professional. Just know that your Orthodox brethren do laugh about it. They don't think it looks good. They don't respect it. And so I'm not sure what else we need to say about the tzitzit. But then we're going to come here, continuing in the mission of the sent ones with regard to the Haftarah, the prophetic portion. It's interesting. Our Spanish branch leader, Michael, pointed out that when Moshe was alive, the people disobeyed him. And then as soon as Moshe was dead, all of a sudden the people began to obey. So I don't know what that says. I thought that was an interesting observation. But in Yahushua or Joshua, chapter 1, starting in verse 1, after the death of Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, Yahweh spoke to Yehoshua, the son of Nun, saying, Moshe is dead. Now arise, go over the Jordan, take all the people with you to the land which I'm giving them, the children of Israel. Okay, and they obey Joshua. So verse 12, and to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, Yehoshua spoke, saying, remember the word which Moshe, the servant of Elohim, commanded you, saying, Yahweh your Elohim is giving you rest and is giving you this land. We'll still see that coming up in the Parasha series. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock Okay, that's all going to stay east of the Jordan. But you shall pass before your brethren armed, all your mighty men of valor, and help them. And this concept of brotherhood, Judah gets it, Ishmael gets it. Haven't seen Ephraim get it very much. I've seen a lot of things in Ephraim trying to get the men to stand together to defend and support and uphold Yahweh's Torah. I haven't seen it yet in the Messianic movement. That's one of the reasons we had to separate from the Messianic movement. Okay, so he says, you shall pass before your brethren armed, all your mighty men of valor, and help them. Okay, it's a serious, full-on allies situation. And this will continue until Yahweh has given your brethren rest. Okay, so you've got yours. Now you need to help them get theirs. Okay, you need to continue until they also have taken possession of the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving them. Then and only then you shall return to the land of your possession and enjoy it. And I don't know, we don't have time to unpack this whole thing, but I've seen several situations in the Messianic realm where there just is no brotherhood. I've seen men just dump their wives, leave them with 2 children, leave them to fend for themselves, and you try to rally support. You try to get the men to hold together, to hold the other men accountable, and no one cares because they're not here to build Yeshua's kingdom. They're here to get something they think for themselves. And they've got this Gnostic attitude towards things. It's like, well, I have all this knowledge and I'm resting on Sabbath and feast. So this is my neighbor, my sister here. Her husband has left her incorrectly, but she's not my problem. That's between her and Yahweh and him and Yahweh. Okay. That's against Torah. Judah at least understands the concept. If it was our secular government, we would get it. You don't want to allow the wrong kind of people to flourish in your society. But I've seen several situations like this where the men just don't care to establish Yahweh standards. I think I've told this before, but I had one situation. I'm explaining to this brother the wife is literally, she's coming up out of her chair. She's so excited, and the husband's like, "Oh, it just sounds like a lot of work." So this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about taking care of everyone's daughters. That's what brotherhood is all about. Okay, when you have a true fraternal society, a true fraternal brotherhood, you're trying to make sure that everyone's daughters are taken care of. You're trying to create the kind of a society where the wives and children are taken care of. That's what you're trying to do. And if the men don't care enough to do that, I doubt you're going to have much of a society long term. That's why we don't have a nation. That's why we don't have a land in Ephraim. That's why we don't have a stick yet. It's because the men aren't getting involved. Okay, moving on. Chapter 2. So Joshua the son of Nun sent out 2 men from Acacia Grove to spy secretly, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. Okay, so they have a mission. They're on a mission to help further the kingdom of Elohim. So they went and came to the house of a harlot named Rahab and lodged there. And Rahab, what does she do? So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab saying, bring us the men that you're hiding. She says, I'm not hiding anybody. Verse 4, then the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, yes, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they were from. Hurry, you can overtake them. She sends them out the wrong way. Verse 12, now therefore I beg you, swear to me by Yahweh, since I have shown you kindness. That's what Yahweh desires among his children, is kindness. That you will also show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token. Since I've helped you to be spared, I hope you to spare my father, my brother, my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And, it's quite the commentary that a woman of the enemy had more faith in Yahweh than many of the Ephraimites today. Because a woman of the enemy, she saw Yahweh. She knew what was coming. She knew what was about to come down. And she defected. She said, I better join his team. I'm going to have to rearrange my life. It's going to cost me everything. I'm going to have to join the war campaign. But at least I'll be alive. So she had more fear of Yahweh than most Ephraimites today. So verse 14, the men answered her, our lives for yours, if none of you tell this business of ours. And it shall be when Yahweh has given us the land that we will deal kindly and truly with you. So we hope the Christian Zionists are getting some kind of credit with the Jewish Zionists for all the money that's flowing Israel's way, all the troops that are flowing Israel's way, all those kind of things. I hope some rabbis are thinking about that somehow. Verse 23, so the two men returned and descended from the mountain and crossed over, and they came to Joshua the son of Nun and told him all that had befallen them. And contrary to in the Torah portion, where the spies gave a bad report, now you had the two spies give a good report. So hopefully things are advancing at least somewhat. They said to Joshua, truly Yahweh has delivered all the land into our hands, and the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us. So once again, a woman of the enemy had more faith than Israelites today. So now we come to our Brit Chadasha portion, and we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see that anytime you're called to be sent out on mission, there's going to be something to do that helps to further and establish the kingdom. So let's take a look again. Strong's Hebrew Concordance 7971, shelach. It's a primitive root to send away, to send out on mission, but almost always with a purpose. Okay, so we see this in other passages. So for example, Luke chapter 9, starting in verse 51, when it came time for Yeshua to be received up, he steadfastly set his face toward Jerusalem, and he sent messengers before his face. And as they went, they entered a village of the Samaritans to prepare for him. So a messenger is going to have something to do. Luke 10 and verse 1, after these things, the master appointed 70 others also and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place where he himself was about to go. So again, the purpose of sending messengers is either to prepare the kingdom or to prepare the way. So that's something to bear in mind in these end times. Luke 22 and verse 8, Yeshua sent Kepha and Yohanan also, saying, go and prepare the Pesach for us that we may eat. So you're sending someone to prepare. Well, how do they know what to do? Here's a big problem. How do you know that you're sending the correct messenger? How do they know what to do? Well, Yohanan or John chapter 12 and verse 49, Yeshua says he didn't speak on his own authority. Okay, he's coming in the role as the chief apostle. He's coming in the role of a prophet. He's not speaking on his own authority. He's not speaking his own words. Okay, he's not saying, Father Yahweh, your way will never fly. You need to give us a Congress of churches. He's not saying, this is what I want. Okay, he's saying he's submitted to his Father's authority. And the Father who sent him gave him a command, what he should say and what he should speak. Okay, so your life is not your own. When you become Yahweh's servant, you are no longer a sovereign. And the higher up in the organization you go, so to speak, or the more responsibility you bear, the more you have to speak Yahweh's words and not your own, the more you have to get yourself out of the way. So in Matthew chapter 10, starting in verse 5, Yeshua sent out the 12 disciples and he commanded them, saying, don't go in the way of the Gentiles. Okay, I interpret that to be don't dissipate, don't get lost in the world like the vast majority of Christians and Messianics today. Okay, also do not enter a city of the Samaritans. We talk about the Samaritans in other places. They were a replacement people for the northern house of Israel. They don't really represent the northern house of Israel. So don't get focused on the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Go rather to those who are interested in the things of Yahweh. They've got a lost Abrahamic spark. Go find them. And as you go, preach, saying, Ephraim, hear this, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Okay, that means the kingdom of heaven is offered. Okay, it's right here. Okay, it's right here. You just have to take hold of it. Okay, Yahweh's got a program. He sent his son Yeshua to show us how to become his people again. Okay, we were lo ami, we were not a people. He came to show us how to become his people again, showing us how to walk out his Torah. Okay, one like Moshe. He came to show us how to do it. Okay, so he says, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Do the best you can. Freely you have received, freely give. Okay, it's not about you. It's not about your take-home pay. It's not about your need to put your children through whatever college. Okay, this is not about a six-figure income. Okay, verse 9, provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts. You don't need to provide for yourself. Don't provide a bag for your journey. Don't even bother with a second tunic. You don't need extra sandals. You don't need staff. For the worker is worthy of his food. That means when you find people who truly appreciate the message, they're going to provide for you as Yahweh's messenger. And if they don't provide for you, then they're not worthy, is what the passage says. Verse 11. Now, this may be at odds with what most Ephraimites would like to believe. It says, now, whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy, meaning who wants to enter into the marital covenant, who wants in with the marital contract, and stay there until you go out. When you go into a household, greet it. And if the household is worthy, meaning they're willing to put skin in the game, they're willing to go all in, let your shalom come upon it. But if it's not worthy, they don't want to enter into relationship with the vine. Let your shalom return to you. And whoever will not receive you nor hear your words, whoever knows what you're offering, but they don't want to enter into it. Okay? When they know you're representing me, when they know you're offering the kingdom of heaven, you're offering a renewed relationship with your Creator. Okay, if they will not receive you nor hear your words, and they don't want to enter in, they don't want to get involved in Yeshua's program, okay, when you depart from that house or that city, shake off the dust from your feet. Okay, assuredly, I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. We have to ask ourselves, do we believe that? So in verse 40, Yeshua says, he who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. Because what's really going on here is that Yahweh wants us to come back into that original right relationship that we had way back when in the Garden of Eden. He still wants that. He's still going to get that. There's going to be a few who will enter into his program, and he will love them and take care of them and give them eternal life. If you receive that message, if you receive Yeshua's invitation to enter into, I don't know what you want to call it, spiritual humanity 2.0, the renewed Adam generation. Okay, if you receive that, it is to receive Yeshua, which is to receive Yahweh. Now, if you only receive Yeshua as a prophet, and you, in the name of a prophet, you can also receive a prophet's reward. That's also a very good reward if you take Yeshua as a prophet. Now, if you take Yeshua simply as a righteous man, then you might receive a righteous man's reward. That's the way I interpret this. The reason I bring this up, there was not sure, I think it was a 2017 study done by Jews for Jesus. And they determined that 1/5 of Jewish millennials surveyed, and I don't know their target market, whether it was the United States or global or whatever it was, but 1/5 of Jewish millennials believe that Yeshua is the son of Elohim. And they go on to they state some very, very interesting, surprising things. If you want to know why that is not a contradiction, we have a study for you. It's in Nazarene Scripture Studies, Volume 1. It's Yeshua, Manifestation of Yahweh. We'd like to put it on video. It's a very important video. This is not the Trinity. Okay, we are against the Trinity. This shows how Scripture says that Yeshua is a manifestation of Yahweh. So I'll leave you to the study. But here's another article, Times of Israel, the Jews for Jesus poll. So it was 21% of Jewish millennials believe that Yeshua is Elohim in whatever form. And there was an additional 27 or 28%, I don't have the number in front of me, who said, no, he's not Elohim, but he's nonetheless a prophet. So you've got almost half of Jewish millennials surveyed believe that Yeshua is at least worth listening to. Okay, so and then it says there, 42% of respondents say that they even observed Christmas. Okay, that's a big mistake. Okay, Yeshua was not an Esavite. So, but moving forward. But whatever you believe Yeshua to be, listen to his words. Understand he came at the end of the Second Temple period as Mashiach Nagid, just like Daniel 9 and verse 26 says. Okay, so Matthew 10 and verse 42, he says, and whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple, assuredly I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward. And the thing that we need to know and understand from this is that, and this, I hope I can get Ephraim's attention on this. Judah understands that it's a participant sport. Judah understands that if you're going to be a Jew, it's going to cost you. You're going to have to be active. You're going to have things to do. You're going to have to give tithes, this kind of a thing. Ephraim, it's very much a participant sport. It's very much like, no, it's a survey course at the local community college. We're just going to take a survey and we're going to learn this knowledge, and Yahweh's going to be so pleased with us that now we have learned all these things that we're supposed to be doing, but we don't want to do them because we don't want to enter in. So Judah has an unclean contract he's working very hard at, and Ephraim has a clean contract. He just doesn't want to do it. So which group is in more trouble? Which group needs more prayer? So I ask you please to pray for all of Israel. Also pray for Ishmael, because after we get a stick together and get reunified with Judah, Ishmael's who we need to help next. Right now, we need to help ourselves. Right now, we need to help ourselves understand that it's not okay to read about what we're supposed to be doing and to think, what? I think I am a disciple, therefore I am one. I mean, what? When if we think we're going to get to the judgment and Yeshua is going to be there and he's going to say, did you do what I said to do? We're going to say, no. Can I come in? And what's he going to say? I don't know you. You didn't enter into relationship with me, not real relationship. A pretend relationship, it's no good. So Acts 13 and verse 1, now in the assembly that was in Antioch, there were certain prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Shimon, who was called Niger, maybe he was African, don't know, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Shaul. So now, here we see people say, well, what about Shaul's apostleship? What about Barnabas' apostleship? So here we see in verse 2, as they ministered to Yahweh and fasted, the set-apart Spirit said, now set apart to me, Barnabas and Shaul, for the work to which I have called them. Okay, so there's a job to do. There's a mission. Then, having fasted and prayed and laid hands on them, they sent them away. So at this point, this is when Shaul and Barnabas initially become disciples, and apostles, and there's other apostles named in Scripture. There's Titus, Apollos, and many. It's it's a Christian myth that we no longer have that system. Verse 4. So, being sent out by the set apart Spirit, because the body laid hands on them, but the action comes from the Spirit. They went down to, I don't know, Seleucia, no say, and from there, no say, I don't know, and from there they sailed to Cyprus. And when they arrived in Salamis, they preached the word of Elohim. Okay, they're preparing the way for Elohim. They're laying groundwork and foundation for the kingdom. Where did they go first? They go to the synagogues of the Jews. Okay, that's where they went. Until the Birchat Haminim came and blocked us out, we went to the synagogues. Just with all the rest, we just believe Yeshua is the Mashiach of Daniel chapter 9. So verse 14, but when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down. I remember as a child, they said, oh no, Paul only went into the synagogues to pull people out and plant churches. Okay, that's not what happened. Shaul went into the synagogues to reason with the people about the Tanakh, to reason with the people about the scriptures. Okay, he was still part of the nation. He was still an Israelite. He was still Jewish, of the tribe of Benjamin. And after the reading of the Torah and the prophets, so after the Torah, the law and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue sent to them, saying, men and brethren, if you have any word of exhortation for the people, say on. Okay, so just referring back to our original question of the week, Shaul continued to be oriented toward the Jewish people. You see that all the way through Acts 28, all the way through to the end. So Acts chapter 13, Maaseh 13, verse 45. But when the Jews saw the multitudes, they were filled with envy and contradicting and blaspheming. They opposed the things spoken of by Shaul. So then Shaul and Barnabas grew bold and said, it was necessary that the word of Elohim should be spoken to you first. But since you reject the word of Elohim and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life, behold, we turn to the Gentiles. Because this word is going to go forth, verse 47, that's why Yahweh commanded us, I have set you, meaning Yeshua, as a light to the Gentiles, that you should be for salvation to the ends of the earth. So Judah had to reject us so that we would then go forth, or so the disciples would then go forth and find lost Ephraim. But now we've come to the end of days. Now the movement is coming to its fruition. Now we're seeing the reestablishment of the lost tribes of Israel. Verse 50, but the Jews stirred up the devout and prominent women and the chief men of the city, raised up persecution against Shaul and Barnabas, and expelled them from their region. They didn't want the program. Verse 51, but they shook off the dust from their feet against them and came to Iconium. And the disciples were filled with joy and with the set apart spirit. And I just need to mention this to the house of Ephraim. Judah's got their own problems, but this is not a reason to hate Judah. This is not a good reason to think less of Judah. Okay, we've got our own problems right now. Okay, Judah's doing things of the Torah we're not doing. That doesn't work for us. Okay, we need to realize that we also have been sent out in a sense. Just as our forefather Joseph was sent out, we also have been sent into the dispersion. And it was for our own disobedience. We didn't want to keep the Torah. We didn't want to get whipped. We didn't want to get scourged, but we also didn't want to keep Yahweh's Torah. So Yahweh's using this for a purpose and a reason. And just as his prophecies don't come back void, we also have a mission to do that must not come back void. Okay, that's why if we are called to serve, whether we're sent or whether we're sent involuntarily, we have a job preparing the way for the kingdom of Yahweh. We've got a mess. We've got a total chaos out here in the messianic mess land. Okay, we're supposed to make a straight way for him. We're supposed to make a highway in the messianic desert so people can find their way. We're guide service. We're shepherds. We're trying to show people the way. We're trying to show people the light. We're trying to lift up Yeshua so he can draw all men unto him. There's a job to do, but to do it, we have to enter in. That is our presentation on the mission of the sent ones. And may Yahweh please lead and guide us all to choose that which pleases him, that we might be found doing the things that his people are doing, that his body is doing, that his hands and feet are doing in these end times. In Yeshua's name, amen.